Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Powerhoof Crawl, a dungeon-delving anti-co-op RPG that will see you brawling with buddies and fraying friendships. Find out if this title knocks it out of the park or if it'll leave you crawling in your skin. I am so sorry, but not really. Now, Crawl tells the story of a dungeon delve gone horribly wrong, as a party of would-be adventurers are driven mad by the dread whisperings of an elder god. Vis-a-vis impromptu mutual agreement, you all decide the best recourse is to murder each other in cold blood. For reasons. And, maybe not surprisingly, but committing a whole lot of murder/blood sacrifice in an unfathomably evil temple built over the body of an eldritch creature goes horribly wrong. Because all those friends you just finished impaling or shooting full of arrows or what have you, they're haunting your ass now in the hopes of gaining possession of your body. And you? Well, the only way out is by carving a path to the being that just finished corrupting your mind in the first place. Now, I'll admit that despite the colorful description of what's happening, Crawl is a story-light experience. But hey, at least I managed to provide a half-decent summary of the gameplay to boot, because, to be frank, Crawl is a very lovely example of an uncooperative game. So like Mario Party, but with a lot more vicious brutality. Anyways, after you're thrown into the mix of things with a bit of hectic human PvP, the majority of the group dies, leaving one human adventurer who can level up, gather gold, and get gear. And then a lot of ghosts looking to put him in his grave so they can inhabit the meat suit. To do this, they get to possess nearby objects to gain ectoplasm, so as to summon slimes, animate the various traps in the dungeon, and, most importantly, to summon monsters from pentacles. Pentagrams? Pentathingies. Because every single monster that you face in Crawl is summoned in and controlled by a rival player. I mean, I guess except for the slimes, but they don't count. Which adds a rather interesting dynamic to the battles, and this is tied to a rather specific choice the players make when they first start up their game. Namely, the decision of which eldritch being they'll worship, which gains them a set of starting creatures to choose from, and a nifty passive ability. Now, whilst your choice of gods to devote yourself to for a round is a bit limited at first, you do unlock more fairly quickly, including the option to mock the gods and get cursed instead. Because, options, making things harder for yourself. Why does this sound like everything I do in games? Anyways, that's something I really do love about Crawl, is that it does have these systems in place to make sure things remain competitive and strategic to a degree. Given that the ghost players receive a spendable resource whenever another player levels that allows them to rank up the monsters they have at their disposal. And each of the various monsters can evolve down multiple paths, which continue to branch at every rank. And the fact that these various monsters have unique movesets, appearances, and traits makes it exceedingly rewarding to explore these options. Plus, some of the items that you can acquire from the dungeon vendors are specifically geared to further empower traps or monsters to help you in, coming back from your horrible recent murder at the hand of another player. Mind you, the game also does a fairly good job at instilling a sense of urgency into its players, given that once an adventurer reaches level 10, they can attempt to tackle the unhallowed god of that dungeon, which makes it a race to not only hit that level, but also be well enough equipped to survive the encounter without giving your peers that same opportunity. And there is only so many times you can fail at that, given that after 3 failed attempts at slaying the god, it devours the player who failed to defeat it and their username, which can make just a bit of last-minute devotion to ensuring the other players fail an entirely viable tactic. And honestly, the game's fairly rewarding win or lose, even against the NPCs, as the more you play, the more things you unlock for the dungeon, allowing it to grow in complexity as more weapon types, gods, spells, and even curios to interact with, like stat-boosting shrines, appear in the dungeon. The gradual increase of things definitely helps to keep things fresh, and also to give time for you to grow acclimatized to the various hazards, just so that you're not immediately overwhelmed by everything being thrown at you. I'll also mention that I have a fair bit of fondness for the creature vault that the game provides, as not only does it provide a little blurb about the monsters, it also allows you to access a challenge mode where you 1v1 an adventure across slowly escalating rounds. It's a pretty nifty challenge/achievement adventure thing that you can often do, but more importantly, it serves as a fairly low-key tutorial for players to engage in when they're unfamiliar with a monster and want time to practice and refine themselves and learn its nuances. Okay, so I like the music in Crawl and the sound effects, but the thing that literally sticks in my brain in an absolutely infectious manner is the over-the-top but amazing voice work for the introductory announcer. It is brilliant and hammy and just super dramatic, and I honestly wish that I got to hear from him a bit more, because those dialogue bits were phenomenal. If you're a fan of pixel work, Crawl's got some very solid animations on its various creatures. What's more, the locale and the various objects in the dungeon are also fun to interact with. Personally, I enjoy its style, so I find it to be a very visually appealing game. Really, the only downside is that given how frantic combat is, it can be a bit confusing when you're a monster and someone else is playing the same one. I'm admittedly a bit derpy and don't always see player colors, which leads to some really embarrassing deaths. In the end, I got very fixated on Crawl for a bit because it made for an excellent party game. Like, yes, there's AI options that you can play with, and the hard difficulty boss are a genuine threat to you, but the game really shines with players, and the mind games and taunting that tends to occur as a result of those reactions. Because it gives you so many options to mess with your friends. Is your friend, who may coincidentally be named Shrimp, winning? Play Keep Away while filling a room with bear traps. Maybe you can deliver defeat straight down the jaws of victory by way of possessing a barrel and fling it in their face as they try to leave a room. I'll also admit that I was pretty bad for summoning slimes in rooms that had more death traps in them than a Saw movie, just to make sure people limped out of a room in as poor condition as possible. That said, whilst it's a load of fun to play as an antagonist, the adventure is also fun to play with, and the options you acquire to challenge the Polter players and the Elder God at the end are both varied and enjoyable. I will say that I do wish that there was a more proper multiplayer that had been included with Crawl. I was able to bypass the couch co-op limitation vis-a-vis the usage of Parsec, but c'est la vie. In any case, given that I'm still plotting means of pulling more of my friends into playing this with me, it should come as no surprise that I rate it as a critical hit. That said, if you're not actually a fan of using Parsec and you don't have friends to actually play this with in real life, I can see if you don't quite get as much enjoyment from it as I did. With all that said, if you folks are still here, then I'd like to thank you folks for both tuning in and sticking till the end. Whether you agree or disagree with my thoughts or just have something to say, I'd love to hear from you folks in the comments. And for those interested in more indie reviews or interviews with the developers, feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified when we have a new release. Lastly, join our Discord. There's a link in the description and the banner, and Lovi will never let me live it down if I keep forgetting to put this in the outro. So you can become a part of our community. It's genuinely cozy in there. Anywho, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks. See ya. Ha! Dies.